What up? What up? What up? What up? What's good, people? What is up? What is up?
Hey there.
Hey, 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 hey.
Hey, hey. Hey, hey. How are you, sir? We should do a whole show just saying hey.
I am doing well. I'm well abreast of current events,
Come on,
all the
breasts.
breaking news that happened on today. So I've been glued to multiple YouTube lives today. So it's nice to be on the other end. How are
Come
you?
on, breasts.
I don't like them on men. I mean, you like a little dab by what you trying to say?
No, no, no,
Mm, that was a
no,
quick no.
no. That's
It's
not
giving
what we're doing.
sizes. But anyway,
Mm-mm. How is everyone in the chat? Thank you all for being here. It is time to talk some politics. I know a lot of people are live right now
there's
because
my
the
Tracy.
Diddy is all the buzz, but Diddy gonna be in jail, and we gonna be out here, and we got things that are affecting our lives. So, regardless as to what he got going on, he never gave me a dime. He never really did nothing for me. So
He
I
didn't
need to
pay you
say,
off?
no, he ain't paid me off.
Oh, okay.
Wasn't one of those fortunate ones. I didn't make it to
No
the
100 million payoff for you.
I wasn't over there with the baby oil. The baby oil.
Oh, I just want to know what brand of lube.
At any rate, we're here to talk about the politics and the things and the things. It is time for us to talk about what is going on today. I sprung something on Kamz, y'all. at the last minute. And he probably looked at his phone like this rat bastard. But I didn't want y'all to think that we were derelict of duties and did not bring you the the most up to date stuff. We do know we have a lot to talk about. So let me give y'all a idea of what we have to talk about. We're definitely going to talk about post debate, where we are with the presidential elections, what a lot of the polling is saying, and those snapshots that we get from that. We have to talk about this debacle that is what the right is saying with regard to um not just Haitians now, is the Haitians and the Venezuelans as well. We'll certainly look at some Senate races. We'll talk about the Supreme Court. And then we will look at some things with um, um, women's health and the right to abortions and things like that. So yeah. But like I was saying, I sprung on Kamz the fact that Kamala was with the NABJ today, and it totally slipped my mind with the whole
Mine too.
Sean Combs situation. I totally forgot, and I knew it was today. I actually knew it was today, and when everything broke out with Sean Combs, it got little to no traction. I really haven't seen anybody reporting on the fact that there was a whole sit down interview done with Kamala Harris and the National Association of Black Journalists. That happened today. And because had I remembered, I probably would have just queued it up and had me and Kamz watch it and do some commentary on it. I mean, I still can,
Oh
not,
yeah, I mean,
I don't know. Nothing's off the table for us. But I thought, did you watch it, sir?
I did. I did. I have my thoughts, but I did watch it. Yes.
Mm. Is that you telling me to call an audible and
No, I'm just saying
oh,
if you are prepared to talk about it, so am
I
I.
am prepared to talk about it.
Well, let's go.
What's your take on it? What's your commentary on it?
I believe that when we talked about the debate, right? We said that her Achilles heel was going to be Palestine and Israel. I've shifted my thinking, and now I believe it's the economy. Um, Due to various factors, COVID, supply chain disruptions, inflation, outright greed. When they keep asking that question, are Americans better off today than they were 4 years ago? I think that's a very hard question to answer. And I think when people look at the price of everything, you know, it ain't just rent that's gone up. So when I think about the pain in the pocketbook, so to speak, I think that economy question is going to dog her this entire cycle.
Um, let me act. I just want to poll the chat. In the chat, put a one in the chat if you saw it. Put a 27 in the chat if you did not see it at all. Because it was a very actually a good interview. The three journalists that interviewed her, they didn't let her just go off on tangents and not address the questions. Every time they brought her back and said, "No, this was my question." Um, I think that um her answer to some of the economic questions. I will say this, which is unfair. I don't think. Oh, nobody said. Tracy said I had her busy all day. I did. I apologize. Everybody says they didn't see it. We may need to play snippets of that or something. because I think it was important. I think it was very important the um to the conversation, because she so much so doesn't talk about or doesn't get credit for having sit down interviews, and this was a real credible sit down interview that she did with real journalists and had to answer some tough questions. When she talked about the economy, not specifically when she addressed that specific question, but I liked how she addressed the economy when they asked her about black male voters
Mm.
and how she reaches black male voters, and she pivoted and pointed to some of her economic policies there. When she talked
Yeah.
about the entrepreneurship and things like that, and things that she wanted to do, I thought that was important. Of course, she gave the cliche, well, I have to be the president um of everybody, but they pushed back and said, but no, we got to talk about the question at hand. So I do like that she answered that. She I felt like she listened to me, because when they asked her about Gaza, she did start this time talking about October 7th. She started by saying we need a ceasefire, which, if you remember, that's what I said she should have done when what was that, the debate, when she mentioned it on the debate. And even when she brought up October 7th, did you see how the girl was like, but no, you need to talk, because not the girl, it was the boy in the middle, the guy in the middle, who kept saying, well,
Um,
no, we know,
when
what are
he
you going to
asked the
do
difference
different? How is the
between,
policy going to change?
I think a good qualifying question to ask to get her viewpoint on was when he was saying, "What is the difference between aggression and self-defense?"
He did ask that.
I think was it Mosley? Mosley? I think his last name was Mosley. Anyway. I just thought that was a really good question because, like, to conservatives, Shori's point about like certain things being subjective, right? I think how people view the issue is very subjective because it, like I said, it didn't occur in a vacuum. And I think that, Benjamin Netanyahu has more of the blame
Hmm.
just because this is his first rodeo as prime minister. It's not. And he's
It's
been
not at
very,
all.
I would describe Benjamin Netanyahu as bellicose. That is how I would describe him. I think that he's been a war hawk. He will always be a war hawk. And you tend to have great support when you're at war, provided you've got the correct reasoning and you can get people on your side. But it's deeply unpopular even in Israel right now. So maybe there'll be some pressure to get them to the table, but I doubt it will be for the election.
Mm. Well, um, I'll tell you what, we can always pivot. Let's do this, Kev. Let's go over, sorry. Let's go over our let's quickly go through some of our agenda points. And then we can always pivot. So we do have some major points that we want to do, and then we'll go through those quickly, because a lot of them we can cover. We're professionals over here. We can cover, and then we can watch with you all that, because I know it's important for you to all to see that, and I don't want to minimize or neglect the NABJ, because we gave full throated coverage to the NABJ interview that they did with Donald John, and I think that it's only fair that that same level of
We
attention
give the same
and
energy.
respect, that same energy is given when they sit down with Kamala. So we'll do that. So let's talk. Our first talking points, or our first topics, were polls that they were giving after the debate, after the crushing debate that she had.
Could we really call that a debate?
Well, yeah, the bludgeoning. um but poll numbers are up for her overall,
Yeah.
which is comforting, even in places where they typically shouldn't be at this time. Places like Iowa, where I believe that she's in the margin of error, wasn't she?
within the marginal area.
She
Yes.
was in the margin of error in Iowa. And overall, in most when you combine all of the polling, overall, she has I believe a 6 point
It's six
lead,
points. It is 6 points. Yes.
a 6 point lead on Donald John, which is good. That is good. We're not going to be, satisfied with that, but certainly
Absolutely not.
we're glad to see a 6 point swing on that. Um, Certainly she has sizable leads within the minority communities like the LGBTQ plus community. Uh, what else am I missing? So overall, that was good. And any commentary on that? Are you surprised?
Um, no, I'm not surprised. What I will say is that most people are fairly reasonable. Like we might want to make this something greater than what it is. I've always said politics is just the process by which we determine who gets what and how much do they get. So I don't think it needs to be anything bigger than that. But people are starting to realize this Donald Trump dude is not what he's purported himself to be. The concepts of a plan. He had no real answers for anything. He can't stay on task, on topic. And so now I think a lot of people that voted for him the first time, I'm just like, well, he said he was going to drain the swamp, like he doesn't have anything. I think people are starting to finally realize that the emperor has no clothes.
Mm. I, I'm only surprised because I did not expect there to be a big bump after the debate. I feel like at least I felt like, and still partially do feel that people are pretty, you know, um, hunkered down in their beliefs.
Mm.
They're dug in, and the MAGA nuts. There's not going to be a whole lot we're going to do. Those people who are really
That's
over
a
there,
reliable voting bloc. That
right?
we're not even thinking about them. I just think that we have to the big reach is for the people that were I think up until the debate undecided. And I think that
Mhm.
you saw most of them was like the vice president is presidential. Answering the question, the demeanor is there, the way in which he spoke about things. I just think that people are just like, yeah, I'm seeing a woman for president. I think a lot of people kind of woke up to that. Because I had some friends where I thought they were fairly liberal, but they're like, I just don't know if a woman, could handle the pressures of the White House.
Mm. That's
So it's like
stupid.
I do feel like it's still some misogyny going on, right? And I think
Mhm.
that mattered in 2016 as well. But people have to take themselves out of it. What's best for the country? And I think we've seen the wave of former Republican administration officials coming out and formally endorsing her. There's like democracy's at stake. It's what's best for the country, not what's best for me.
I um I definitely feel that I think that the voters will turn out and do what's right. My fear is
Mm,
the decision is going to be taken out of their hand. One of those polls that we looked at was one that said 52% of Republicans said that if the Democrat wins, they won't accept the results of the election. And doubling down of that 14% said they would be willing to do something to overturn said results, which is, we already know that there are legal things in place. There are policies and laws in place already to thwart democracy. So I really, it scares me that we could be here on November 6th, 7th, 8th, or dare I say November 12th, a week later, and there are nefarious things going on all over the country,
Yes,
specifically in states of consequence where a couple points could decide whether or not somebody has the 270.
I think the issue that I've seen that overarches a lot of this is, is the election valid? Blah blah blah. It's not even a team thing. It's the fact that, as we were talking about earlier, the biggest thing that Trump has done, he's undermined the electoral process. He's cast so much fear, uncertainty, and doubt that people on both sides are like, well, if it doesn't go my way, it has to be rigged. And I think we didn't have that before. We had pretty high confidence in the integrity of our elections, and now people are just thinking that it can be stolen. I think that that's really dangerous, because if that is a pervasive sort of thought process, does that translate to people then going, well, what's the point of me getting out to vote? So in some ways, this sort of thought process could suppress the vote. If they feel like their vote's not going to matter, why go to the polls?
Yeah,
That's the scary part to me, because I would say, as a whole, Americans are fairly fucking apathetic. If it's
there's
not
a lot of
directly impacting them, eh. Because our 30 something percent voter turnout,
that. I think it should. Why can't we be like, what is that, Australia, where it's against the law not to?
compulsory
I think it's
voting,
Australia where it's
compulsory
against
voting. Yeah,
the law not to vote. Mm. Like they have a whole national holiday. Hell, we have a national holiday for everything else.
I don't. I've always thought that the election should be a national holiday.
I mean, why not? I mean, just makes sense.
Everyone should get the time to go vote all day. We don't have issues with long lines and all this other stuff, but that's, I think it would encourage participation.
Well,
My question to you is, where is Jill Stein at when she's not running for president? Where's she at? Because I don't see it.
I'm not gonna even. You know me. I have very little patience and time for the foolery or fuckery. Uh,
I don't know where she be at, because
mm.
I don't see her.
Speaking of which, as we're quickly pivoting, um, there was also something we saw that there were the Justice Department was getting more than normal threats, credible threats against election workers, poll workers, and all of the individuals involved with the election processes across the country. That was something we saw, and it was quite alarming coming out of the Justice Department. My question when I saw it was, I'm like, well, what are y'all doing to thwart this? If y'all already know this is here, how are you all working to mitigate the threat that's happening?
I mean, look at what we're doing with Secret Service right now. So, like,
um I don't know who this person is telling us to get off stuff, but I don't have a wrench. I'm sure somebody with a wrench can handle these people, because you're telling us to turn off NBC, MSNBC. Somebody may turn you off. I don't know. They can
I
do that.
don't watch MSNBC. I
The
do
people
read.
who have wrenches, they can turn you off if they'd like to. Um, you know, just saying.
Don't feed the trolls. Don't feed the trolls.
But what was I about to say? Um, oh, but that was my question. Like, what are they doing to mitigate the situation? What are they doing to do away with these threats? Don't just sit there and tell us that, oh, there's a problem coming, and then not be doing anything to fix the problem or to try to mitigate the problem.
What are the resources that are being provided for this? If we are saying that we're in a very dangerous sort of political environment where people are really gravitating toward political violence, with the two assassination attempts on the former president, what are they going to be able to do to these election officials in places that don't
Mm.
have, anywhere near adequate resources of the Secret Service,
I
right?
people push back on me with this. I think one of the biggest issues is there's always, and they're unyielding on this. There's always been this. Well, elections are a state right, and states have the right to do their elections however they want. That sounds
Mhm.
good in principle, but when you have horrible things, unsightly things happening in various states, and elections officials and state officials are doing nothing to stop it, and in some cases encouraging it, how you're asking me to to trust these people when they've proven they can't be trusted.
And it's
Mm.
interesting because I've never understood really the argument that it's the states gets to decide, so the state gets to decide who to disenfranchise. That's
I,
what the argument has essentially been. And as far as I'm no constitutional lawyer, but as far as I know of, they could actually change election law. They
I feel
just
like
can't really fuck with the senator thing.
I feel like the federal government should be in charge of federal elections and federal races that are federal races,
Hmm.
Congress, the presidency, and any other
Yeah.
things that are federal. And if you want to have the states to have their rights, y'all have the right to conduct all of your state elections however the hell you want.
You know what? I think that'd be a great compromise, actually, because what's the real pushback against that? This is impacting everyone from a federal perspective, so they should have purview over the federal elections.
And on the state level, from the governor and all of the other state, election
The
have
Secretary of
at it.
State can continue to do what they do.
Mhm.
They have a limited scope now with only the state races.
I'm
I
not
like
rushing y'all. I just want us to get to
that
I
idea.
just want to give y'all this opportunity to see this because I do know it's important.
Tracy said you need to come back tomorrow and watch it.
Tracy,
I mean, you did work the hell out of Tracy today.
am I not working today as well? This
I
is my
mean,
second live today.
but you worked my good girl Tracy to the
I didn't know
bone.
that was really be working Tracy. I'll take the blame. But y'all don't want to blame really be. Y'all don't want to put the blame where it belongs with really be. Really be before she got off live last night said, I know Tracy gonna be out there doing da 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 da. That was before I even said anything to Tracy. So let the record show. I'm just saying. Hey Sean, what's going on, Five? Anyway,
First of all, don't do my boo really be. Don't do my really be. Cause I love really be down. Don't do her like that.
I ain't think about her.
I am. I gotta go see my girl. But you did work Tracy. So I mean, if you want to
You don't know what I did to Tracy. Did you turn your mic off?
no.
Because you are very low right now.
Oh, okay. I just think that
Maybe it's me.
it is probably you. Is it me? Am I the drama right now?
Wait, did is am I hearing things right?
Am I the drama? Is it me?
Because his volume went really low on my end. I don't know. Maybe it's me. Go ahead.
But I don't know. Like, what were okay? So Tracy. Okay, I look.
Oh, okay. So it is you, Cams. It's not me. You did something. You're the IT guy. You messed up something.
I work in cybersecurity. I work in information assurance. Oh, damn
They said they hear a sound. Go out and come back in. Anyway, but no, one of the other things as he's coming in that we also talked about today and we looked at today was what they were saying about the Haitian migrants as well as the Venezuelan migrants. Um, okay, I got you, Sean. I got you. Yeah, we're gonna have one. Um, one of the things that we found, in addition to all of the things that you know, with them continuing to spread those racist tropes in the actual city of Springfield, Ohio, the actual freaking sheriff there. Shall I tell you what he has going on? I just want to read this real fast and let y'all grapple with this because I just want y'all to know this is real, really real. These people are serious. Y'all be thinking these people ain't serious. These people are serious. An Ohio sheriff instructed residents to keep a list of homes displaying campaign signs in support of the Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris and her running mate Tim Walz in remarks on social media that caused alarm. Bruce D. Zukowski, the Republican sheriff of Portage County, posted the remarks on Friday to his personal professional Facebook pages, warning that undocumented immigrants would arrive if Harris were elected over his party's nominee, Donald Trump. Quote, when people ask me what's going to happen if the flip flopping laughing hyena wins, I say write down all the addresses of the people who had their signs, it had her signs in their yards. End of quote. He went on to say, when referring to immigrants, quote, as illegal human locusts, will already have the addresses of their new families who supported their arrivals. End of quote. Yes, he called the immigrants illegal human locusts. In the same post, this sheriff, sitting sheriff, added screenshots from Fox News stories claiming that the Biden administration immigration policies were fueling quote a crime wave and destroying small towns. This is the sitting sheriff of a of a county in these yet to be United States of America.
It was Ohio, correct?
It is Ohio.
Which is allegedly one of the states that's, up for grabs. It's a battleground state right now. So that's a little bit worrying that, that sounds like intimidation by a government official to me,
Mm-hmm.
because it could cause a chilling effect. You want to write people's addresses down in this environment where people are crazy. When I still remember Pizzagate, and the building didn't even have a basement where all this alleged stuff was going on.
The problem is these are what you're telling people to do is directly threaten. These are direct threats at people. If you're writing people's addresses down, telling people to go about writing this stuff down, you think they just gonna write it down and throw it in the trash? These people were willing to end the life of the sitting vice president, the Speaker of the House, and the Senate Majority Leader, in addition to other members of Congress. If they're willing to do, and we're actually in the process of doing that, if they could do that, what do you think they're going to do to some random neighbor down the street?
The power of the ignorant. Because propaganda works. It's effective. We've seen it throughout history with a lot of these political movements. When these authoritarian governments take over, propaganda, scapegoating. Right now, it's looking to be the Haitians. So it's a tinge of racism mixed with xenophobia, and boom, now they're to blame for all of the terrible decisions that you don't want to take accountability for.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Haitians' fault. The Haitians did it. What'd they do?
Nothing.
You let your dog out. You didn't close the fence, so your dog ran away. The Haitians ate it. there's no evidence for any of this stuff, but people create their own realities at this point. They convince themselves.
And
That's
they
why I'm just like,
convince other
there's some
people.
people on the left and the right, you're not gonna sway them at all. It's those few people in the middle that are going to be consequential in this election.
Let's hope these people are rational thinking.
It feels
Anyway,
a little bit like a group project where you know you did your part, but you don't know about everybody else, but y'all got to share that grade.
mhm, you got to drag some of these people along because you're like, I'm not getting no F for you.
Period.
So I ain't got no type of time.
You know what? I'll just do it all myself. Just put y'all names on it because
Yeah,
I
don't
don't
worry
trust
about
you.
it. You know us Capricorns, when we say don't worry about it, we mean that shit. Now we cussing you out. We ain't gonna never trust you with nothing else again in life.
No.
But that don't worry about it. Don't worry. I got it. It's cool. Don't worry about it. That's the last thing you want to hear a good Capricorn say. Yeah, don't worry about it.
Do what we always do.
Because we trust ourselves more than we trust you people. Anyway, you ready to get this party started?
Of course I am. Let's go.
Let's do it. This is from the sit down interview that Kamala Harris had with the NABJ today in Philadelphia.
Without further ado, Vice President Kamala Harris.
Good afternoon, everyone. Madam Vice President, thank you so much for doing this and making the time.
Of course.
Just a little bit busy right now. We want to start on an issue that Americans across the country say is their number one concern, and that's the economy.
Mm-hmm.
A question that has been asked of you and everybody that's on the Democratic side is whether or not voters are better off now than they were 4 years ago. Are they better off now than they were 4 years ago?
So when we came into, well, first of all, let me just say, it is good to be with the National Association of Black Journalists, and I thank you for the work you do and that your members do every day. It is very important that we ensure that this organization and your members always have the resources and the platforms to deliver the voices that must be heard. So I thank you for hosting me today. 4 years ago, when we came in during the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. We came in during the worst public health epidemic in centuries. We came in after the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And a lot of it due in large part to the mismanagement by the former president as it relates to COVID and obviously January 6th. And we had then a lot of work to do to clean up a mess. As of today, we have created over 16 million new jobs, over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs. We have the lowest Black unemployment rate in generations. We have invested in small businesses, and they're to the benefit of many people, but including Black small businesses, some of the highest rate of creation of new Black small businesses in years. We have done the work of capping the cost of prescription medication for our seniors for issues like insulin. And again, I'm speaking to the Black journalists who care about all people, but in particular, I'll talk about the impact on Black people, where we know Black folks are 60% more likely to be diagnosed with diabetes. And we have now finally capped the cost of insulin for our seniors at $35 a month, capped the cost of prescription medication for our seniors at $2,000 a year, because we, unlike the former president who promised to do it, we finally have allowed Medicare to negotiate drug prices against the big pharmaceutical companies. And these are just some of the accomplishments. Is the price of groceries still too high? Yes. Do we have more work to do? Yes. And I will tell you, I do believe that I offer a new generation of leadership for our country that is about, in particular, turning the page on an era that sadly has shown us attempts by some to incite fear, to create division in our country, and to do the work that is about bringing some level of optimism and, dare I say, ambition about what I know is possible in our country. And so my plan for the economy includes what I imagine and believe and call an opportunity economy. What we can do to grow an opportunity economy where all people have access to the resources to compete, to apply their incredible work ethic, their ambition, their aspirations, and their dreams, and actually not just get by, but get ahead. And I can talk in more detail about it, but specifically, I'll mention a few things.
Yeah.
One of the big issues that affects people right now in terms of the economy and their economic well-being is we have a shortage of housing supply. It's too expensive. People can't afford to buy a home. You know, we grew up, our parents, where they had the ability to somehow believe the American dream was attainable. Not so much for younger working people. And I recognize that. So my approach is a new approach, which is to say, let's just take this and deal with it head on. And part of my approach is to say, I'm gonna employ and engage the private sector, in particular home builders with tax credits, to give them the incentive to create new housing, 3 million by the end of my first term, and understanding that not everybody is, handed a silver spoon, but works hard and is trying to save up for a down payment. Part of my plan under my opportunity economy is to give first-time home buyers a $25,000 down payment assistance so they can just get their foot in the door to be able to then engage in what will prove to be their opportunity to build intergenerational wealth. And here's my personal experience coming at that. I grew up a middle-class kid. My mother was hardworking. She raised me and my sister Maya. She saved up. And it was only by the time I was a teenager that she could afford to actually buy her first home. And I know, and I identify with, I know where I come from.
Madam Vice
And
President.
I know, but I'm just gonna finish. I know that so many people work so hard and should have the opportunity to just get their foot in the door. Again, so it's not just about getting by, but getting ahead, please.
I'd like to ask you more about the
Hold
opportunity.
on 1 second. You saw how she said, "Hey, Madam Vice President, you being real." I think she felt that she was like, "Madam Vice President, you about to go into your whole life history, ma'am. We asking you about the economy. We asked you about how you and Maya grew up." She did kind of push her on that.
I mean,
She did.
that was pushback, but I've never liked that question because the economy is different things to different people. It could be groceries, for the elderly, it could be the cost of their medications. Like for me, motherfucking student loans. So it's different for everyone. So I think it's just very hard to speak to that. They need to be a little bit, there needs to be more nuance in the question. Because I think that then it pushes them to answer in a more honest way. But what are your thoughts?
I think that I agree with you that the economy is a lot of things to a lot of people. And I know journalists are usually looking to have them answer the talking points on the economy. I do think she laid out one of her plans, which is the her wanting to make housing more affordable for first time buyers. But all of this extra frivolous, I think they should have stopped her earlier, on that.
Yes.
And because if you ask Donald Trump about the economy, what does he say all the time? It's tariffs, tariffs, tariffs. That's all. That's his only answer. His only answer is, "Oh, I'm going to have tariffs." Mind you, he had 4 years to do that and wasn't able to do that then. But let me shut up.
Well, they did put some tariffs down, but as we all know, because we, looked at history, every time there's tariffs, it's increased price of goods. So if you're saying this economy is trash and you're going to improve it, tariffs would do the opposite of that. But
if I recall correctly, he gave tariffs to every country except for the country that he said he was going to give tariffs to, because when he thought about trying to do it, and the economist said, yeah, there's no way in hell you're going to give tariffs to China when so much of what we get comes from China, and we already owe a lot of money to China. That's not going to work out too well for you.
And what they gonna do? Make us pay? What they gonna do?
Well, they had already told him, giving tariffs to China would cost the American public more, by far.
I mean, I know that the Biden administration, at least, they put a tariff of 100% on EVs coming into the country from China, because there's fears that they're going to flood the market.
But that's on one thing, whereas he said he was just going to have a universal tariff on China. That's what he ran on. Because they asked him, do you mean certain goods? No, he said, no, it's everything coming out of China. And they were like, okay, we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. I mean, tariffs to me are just a form of protectionism. And it's like, you don't get to sell out the entire middle class by signing all these free trade agreements, having the race to the bottom, wages and exploitation globally. And now that, the chickens are coming home to roost, now you want to do these tariffs to try to like hand wave how these were deliberate economic policy decisions that got us here in the first place.
And there's that. Let me continue.
Economy, housing is a part of it, as well as expanding the earned income tax credit, financial support, as you mentioned, for first-time buyers, and a $50,000 tax deduction for startups and small businesses. But I want to talk to you about the squeeze that millions of Americans are also dealing with that impacts their ability to work and make money, and that is childcare and elder care. And it's a squeeze for millions of people. In some parts of the country, it costs more for childcare than for rents. I think Bloomberg recently reported an average of $33,000 a year. So I'm just wondering, you mentioned that in your opportunity economy, a child tax credit, but that's just one part of an ecosystem. Please tell us, what plans will you propose to guarantee that families can actually afford childcare and elder care?
So to your point, it is sadly the state of affairs in our country that working people often have to decide to either be able to work or be able to afford childcare. Like they can't afford childcare and actually do the work that they want to do because it's too expensive and it doesn't actually level out in terms of the expense versus the income. My plan is that no working family should pay more than 7% of their income in childcare. Because I know that when you talk about the return on that investment, allowing people to work, allowing people to pursue their dreams in terms of how they want to work, where they want to work, benefits us all. It strengthens the entire economy. We saw, for example, during the pandemic, what happened. And it sadly has dissipated as a conversation that we need to resuscitate, which is the number of women that had to leave the workforce because of a lack of childcare and home health care. And so many of our families, and in particular women, end up carrying the responsibility. Men do too, of course. What we call people who are in the sandwich generation.
Exactly.
Who have young children and are also taking care of their parents. And it is just absolutely too expensive for them to be able to work and do that. So my plan is not only about 7% of income for working people for childcare, but also we need to do better for our childcare providers and our home healthcare providers in terms of ensuring that they receive the wages that they deserve based on the dignity of their work. I have spent time with home healthcare providers, and their work is some of the most taxing work you can imagine. And I actually, when my mother was sick with cancer, did a lot in terms of taking care of her. And the work that is about taking care of a loved one, in particular an elder, is extraordinarily heavy in terms of the emotional toll, the time it takes, and we do it because that is what we do. But not everyone has the ability to take time from work to do it, and they need help. And we need to make sure we have home health care workers that can help them. But I want to also get back to the earlier point that you made about extending the child tax credit. So part of my new approach is we need to expand the child tax credit. And so part of my plan that is under an opportunity economy is to extend and expand the child tax credit to $6,000 so that young families in particular, for the first year of their child's life, which is an extraordinarily important time in their development, have the resources to be able to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy children's clothing, and not have to worry about whether they're going to be able to meet their other needs. And I don't need to remind anybody here, especially these esteemed journalists, but when we expanded the child tax credit a couple of years ago, we reduced Black child poverty by half. And so again, if you talk about the benefit and if you think about the benefit to the economy overall, it strengthens our economy to do things like pay attention to affordable childcare, affordable home health care, and extending the child tax credit.
Madam Vice President, Black men, as you know,
Let me
are
pause there,
closely watched.
because they're about to get into a real good question, but that I do want to delve into. But to that question where they asked her, okay, about the child tax, she spent a lot of time on the child tax credit. Didn't talk a lot about what they would do to mitigate elder care.
Mhm.
That, and I also think that for future questions, I've always, as a non-married single adult, and there are a lot of people that fit into that category. As much as they talk about how JD Vance tries to make people feel bad about not having kids, I think the American government as a whole tries to disparage people who decide not to get married, because there's no incentive, there's nothing out there that they do to try to do anything to aid or assist in people who are single and not married, single, not married, and have no kids. You're just supposed to just suck it up and bear the brunt of everything and just fuck it, right?
Well, yeah, that's how it works because we care about those families because they're creating future worker bees to keep this machine going. Right? So we're not viewed as contributing to that, but we tend to, be in more skilled labor positions, more white collar things. We contribute heavily to the tax base and get little to nothing in return. But such is it. But I think that part of that is that voting bloc they've just never looked at it and been like, okay, well, what's in it for me? Because I know all this Social Security, that I've been paying into, I need to see something. Because I could have just kept that. Give me something. Because I'm tired of owing taxes every year. What's in it for me?
Nothing. Mind you, it's people that ain't had a job. Shut up, LT, because I ain't gonna talk about
Go there.
who ain't got no job, ain't had a job, ain't tried to get none, but every year they getting thousands and thousands of dollars of my money in these same earned child care tax credits that she talk about. Mind you, I'm over here scratching and surviving, hanging in the child line.
Now, I don't think you're hanging in the child line. That's a little bit of hyperbole. But I will say that I think that we're looking at the financial incentives wrong for a lot of what we're doing. I just think that there needs to be, I just think, look, if you are on if you're on government assistance and you were saying the reason why you can't work is because you have a child, don't worry. We're not paying you no more. We're gonna pay for this child care directly so that you could get to work. I think that should have always been the setup. Because look, if you're not working and you're able-bodied, I don't think the American taxpayer needs to carry their economic trouble and your big ass on their back. I just think that's too tall of an ask.
They better not ever have me get up there and ask them, because I'm sure gonna ask them what they're doing for those of us who are single, not married, and don't have no kids that are bearing the brunt of a lot of these taxes. Let's continue.
Extending the child tax credit.
Madam Vice President, Black men, as you know, are a closely watched voting bloc. You've hosted Black men at your residence.
Yep.
You have engaged Black men and centered them in your economic opportunity tour. But polling shows that some Black men, particularly young Black men, are considering voting for Donald Trump, and they see him as better for the economy. What is your message to young Black male voters who feel left out of this economy, and how can your economic policies materially change their lives?
So I appreciate the spirit of the question, but I'll tell you, I've often been asked this question in a way that I've had to respond by first saying that I think it's very important to not operate from the assumption that Black men are in anybody's pocket. Black men are like any other voting group. You gotta earn their vote. So I'm working to earn the vote, not assuming I'm going to have it because I am Black, but because the policies and the perspectives I have understands what we must do to recognize the needs of all communities. And I intend to be a president for all people. Specifically as it relates to what we need to do, to your point around economic opportunity. Yes, I started way before I was at the top of the ticket at what I called an economic opportunity tour, focused on Black men. Understanding that, for example, we have so many entrepreneurs in the community who do not have access to capital, but they've got great ideas, an incredible work ethic, the ambition, the aspiration, the dream, but don't have the relationships necessarily. So my work has included, as vice president, getting billions more dollars into community banks, including working with the big banks to do that, so that we can increase access to capital for our small businesses, for our startups. Part of my plan under my economic opportunity plan going forward is that right now, startup entrepreneurs, small businesses only get a tax deduction of $5,000. Nobody can start a small business with $5,000. So I'm expanding that to $50,000. Understanding, again, that when people have the opportunity to have the resources to get started, they're going to put the good ideas, they're going to put the hard work into it. And part of what I also know is that our young Black men, our Black men, just like any group of people, anybody, our small businesses are really the backbone of our economy overall. And when they do better economically, we all do better. Part of my work is about understanding what we need to do in dealing with, for example, the historic inequities that have faced the Black community around home ownership, right? I don't have to go through the history with anybody here about what that has meant in terms of redlining, what that has meant in terms of biases and home appraisals, and what the impact it has had on stemming the opportunity to build intergenerational wealth because of those obstacles. So part of the work that I have done and will continue to do is identify, speak truth about those obstacles and address them. Another example is medical debt. 1 in 4 Black families or individuals is more likely to carry medical debt than others. So part of my perspective, and as vice president, part of the work that we have done is to say that we're going to eliminate medical debt from being on your credit score. Because until now, medical debt worked against your credit score, and people know their credit score like your weight, right? You know that number. And the difference between what that number is and what it needs to be is the difference between you being able to get a car loan, a small business loan, or even a leasing on an apartment. And so part of my approach is understanding the obstacles that traditionally and currently exist to allow anyone, including Black men, be able to achieve economic wealth. And I'm gonna tell you, I don't think it is sufficient to just only talk about economic policy around reducing unemployment. It is an important marker, and I'm proud of the work that we've done thus far, but it should be a baseline there, everybody's working. The point is, do people have an opportunity to build wealth if that's what they choose to do, if that's what they want to do. And a lot of my perspective as we go forward is just that. I believe that there are a lot of opportunities that are available to the American people if we just see, if we see people and understand what they want for themselves and their families, and then meet them where they are.
Madam Vice President.
Let me stop there. That was a long answer now, Kamala. That was a long way around it. But to answer your question, Ravine, this was today in Philadelphia. And this was a sit-down interview with the NABJ, the National Association of Black Journalists. This, as we stated earlier, was something that didn't get any coverage because everybody was concerned with Diddy and all that Sean Combs has going on, even though whether or not he goes to jail, whether or not he anything happens to him is really not going to affect any of our lives. It's good gossip, but this was a sit-down interview where the NABJ, just like they did with former President Trump, they had a sit-down interview with Vice President Harris. So yeah, that's what this is. Now, she did answer the question. She did. She talked about, wanting to do more for entrepreneurship and small businesses, in the form of, giving, instead of just $5,000, having a $50,000 I don't know if did she say it was a tax credit or some type of $50,000 incentive. I'm not sure. I forgot. I know she said. I just don't remember.
I thought it was a tax incentive.
Okay. But what do you think about her answer to that question?
I thought it was a good answer. It gave some additional nuance to the economic policy, because I think you don't really hear her go into depth about it. You just kind of hear those sound bites when she's talking about like the opportunity economy and like what does that mean. She's actually talking about specific policy now that I think is important. But I just think that it was such a refreshing answer when she said we need to look past just unemployment.
Unemployment, yeah.
It's an important metric, but we need to look beyond that.
Like that should be a baseline, like she said. And I'll say this while we're yet still at this point, I'll probably reiterate it at the end. The fact that we can actually parcel out real substantive answers to real policy and say, I like that, I don't like that, I think this is light years ahead of where the other side is at this point, because all they want to do is talk about what the other side is not doing, or have personal attacks which is to cloud the fact that they don't have real substantive policies. So I do like that that this National Association of Black Journalists, and they tried with Donald Trump. To be fair, they did try to have him answer clear-cut questions, go into policy. I think one of the mistakes that was made is, if they were going to have him there, make him answer questions on policy, but they did start off having him answer questions about the fact that he said bad things about Black people, which we know, which is clear. Y'all knew that before he came. He knew that. If you would have hit him on policy, kind of like they did with Kamala here, I think it would have went in a different direction.
It's also, I think some of it too is weaponized incompetence. If you don't, seem like you're competent, just like that person that's at work, you're wondering why they're still there, because they can't do really anything but this one thing. So like everyone else has to bear that load. So I feel like the expectations on Vice President Harris are like very high, but we're not asking her opponent to give anything that a president would normally be able to expound about in various settings.
Absolutely.
So it does feel a little unfair how we seem to press the scale down so hard on her and what those expectations are for her. But when the other side has the bar set so low as to still leave children behind, that it's a little concerning.
They don't even talk a good game. You know, like most
Maybe
politicians
that's
can at least talk a good game. They don't even try to talk a good game on the other side.
I mean, to a certain degree, that's refreshing, though. That you know what you're getting with them. Project 2025. You know what you're getting.
Yeah.
You know, effective governance, probably not.
All right.
President, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the war in Gaza. You've called for a ceasefire hostage deal and a two-state solution as an end to the war for many months now. And while you've expressed support for Israel to defend itself, a two-state solution and a ceasefire are at odds with what Benjamin Netanyahu has said is their right to defense. If it matters, as you say, how Israel defends itself, where do you see the line between aggression and defense? And our power as Israel's ally to do something?
Okay, a lot to unpack in what you just said. So let's start with this. I absolutely believe that this war has to end, and it has to end as soon as possible. And the way that will be achieved is by getting a hostage deal and a ceasefire deal done. And we are working around the clock to achieve that end. Stepping back, October 7, 1,200 Israelis were slaughtered, and actually and some Americans, by the way, in that number, slaughtered. Young people who were attending a concert, women were horribly raped. And yes, so I have said, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And
But Madam Vice President, I think my ask is the difference between aggression and defense.
No, but it's important to put it in context, which is what I'm doing, and I'll get to that. And so how it does so matters. And far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Women and children. We have seen with horror the images coming out of Gaza. And we have to take that seriously. And we have to agree that not only must we end this war, but we have to have a goal of a two-state solution, because there must be stability and peace in that region, in as much as what we do in our goal is to ensure that Israelis have security and Palestinians in equal measure have security, have self-determination and dignity.
A question for you on that, though. What levers does the U.S. have to support Palestinians in their right to self-determination? And is it even possible as Israel's ally?
Well, absolutely. I will tell you, I have been actively involved in, for example, meeting not only with Israeli officials, but with Arab officials to talk about how we can construct a day after scenario where we participate in ensuring those exact goals that I outlined, including as part of the principles that should be applied to those goals, that there be no reoccupation of Gaza, that there be no changing of the territorial lines in Gaza, that there be an ability to have security in the region for all concerned in a way that we create stability, and let us also recognize in a way that ensures that Iran is not empowered in this whole scenario in terms of the peace and stability of the region. But absolutely, the United States of America absolutely has a role, which is why we have been active, in particular with the Qataris and the Egyptians, around attempting to get a deal done and get it done as quickly as possible.
But Madam Vice President, just to follow up really quickly, is there a specific policy change that you as President of the United States would say you would do that would help this along? Because you've gotten a lot of credit for emphasizing the humanity of Palestinians. But what I often hear from folks is that there's no policy change that either you or President Biden have gone and said they would do? Is there a specific policy change as president that you would do in our helping of Israel?
We need to get this deal done, and we need to get it done immediately. And that is my position, and that is my policy. We need to get this deal done.
But in the way that we send weapons, in the way that we interact as their ally, are there specific policy changes?
Well, Eugene, for example, one of the things that we have done that I am entirely supportive of is the pause that we've put on the 2,000-pound bombs. And so there is some leverage that we have had and used. But ultimately, the thing that is going to unlock everything else in that region is getting this deal done. And I'm not going to disclose private conversations, but I will tell you, I've had direct conversations with the Prime Minister, with the President of Israel, with Egyptian leaders, and with our allies. And I think we've made ourselves very clear this deal needs to get done in the best interest of everyone in the region, including getting those hostages out who, I mean, we saw the latest example of what happened with the 6 most recently, one of whom was an American citizen.
But what do you say to those that say that's not enough, that stopping the 2,000-pound bombs the one time wasn't enough, that this administration, your possible administration, has to do more?
Well, we are doing the work of putting the pressure on all parties involved to get the deal done. But let me be very clear also. I support Israel's ability to defend itself. And I support the need for Palestinians to have dignity, self-determination, and security as we move forward and get a two-state deal done. But right now, the thing we need to get done is this hostage deal and the ceasefire deal. We need a ceasefire. We need the hostage deal.
I want to switch gears to racial justice, Madam Vice President.
Mhm.
Hold on. That was a lot. Let me start, and I'll let you go right after this. I have to applaud the journalists here. They did not let up. When she tried to meander around and give vague cooking, no, we need to know real policy. No, let me push back. No, what does that mean? I do applaud them for continuing to press the issue and not just allow you to just say, oh, we need a ceasefire and we need the hostages returned, and let that just be, as if that just happened by saying it. Go ahead, Kamz.
I just don't know what people are expecting in terms of like specific policy. They would never be so specific as to say what the policy will be or what they would do, whether those are economic or military solutions. They just wouldn't speak about it. Even when you look at previous platforms, they just kind of give you very high level what they'd like to see. More collaboration with this region, opening up economic. It's never drilled down. This is what we want. This is how we're going to do it. They never go that deep down. And plus, because I would say the sensitivity of the situation, I would prefer that neither of them really talk about it, other than we need a ceasefire. That's all I want to hear right now. It's a constantly evolving situation with multiple states. Like when we had the Iran deal, there were a ton of different countries that were involved in that. We can't just say, well, this is what we're going to do. Like we also there are other moving pieces that are a part of the equation. So I'm just like, she could say our official stance on it is this. Like, I don't like particular policy. I don't think it works for foreign policy. I just don't think it does, because again, the president doesn't really run that. You just can't unilaterally approve treaties.
I appreciate, like I said from the beginning, I understand that journalists have their jobs. And even if they can't tell us, it is their responsibility still to ask the question and force them to say, I can't, that's not something that I really can get into. And she kind of alluded to that when she said, I can't go into private conversations that I've had. I understood that. I will say this, although on the answer to this question, I probably give her a C-. This is probably the best she's done in trying to attack this question. This is the best that she's done. Is it satisfactory for me and what I want to hear? No, absolutely not. That's why we're at a C minus. But in terms of how she's answered this, this is the best I've seen her attempt to attack this question. I will say that. One thing that she says and that everybody else says that irks my spirit, they say I fully defend Israel's right to defend themselves, but never talk about Palestinians' right to defend themselves. Everybody should have a right to defend themselves. And when you make that statement, if that's going to be your blood, you should say, I absolutely support 1,000% Israel's right to defend itself, and equally, I absolutely support the Palestinians' right to defend themselves. Because otherwise, what you're saying is, well, if Israel feel like somebody did something bad to them, warranted or not, they can go and just do whatever, and the Palestinians is just supposed to stand there and take it. Innocent people now that are having their whole bloodlines eradicated and obviated, and they're just supposed to stand there and take it, and they don't have the right to defend themselves. That's kind of not that's not fair.
It doesn't seem like it's even handed. I think a better policy position for everyone involved in this, running on both sides is, we strongly believe in the concept of sovereignty of democratically elected governments. This would include the right to self-defense.
Right. And that's on all sides. That's on all sides.
And you just ended there.
Right.
And you just ended there. It doesn't seem like you're saying, oh, Israel could do this or Israel can do that. And then you could go further. And in cases of self-defense, this must be within the limits of internationally agreed upon tactics.
Because I see what you're saying, crazy homebody girl, but you can't say Israel has the right to defend themselves, but the Palestinians just have a right to dignity. That's not that's not the same. You can't say, oh, they got the right to defend themselves, but y'all over here, y'all just have the right to dignity. The hell does that mean?
And I mean, in this terms, like, what is dignity? Is that an open casket funeral versus closed?
Right.
Like, what does that mean? And it's a very frustrating situation because none of this stuff happened in the vacuum. And I think that the constant focus on October the 7th
exactly
is
disrespectful.
Israel has a right to self-defense. Israel has a right to self-defense. Neither of them are innocent, to be quite frank. But what is going on, what we have seen, what the world has seen, I absolutely do not like it. And it needs to stop. It has to, because too many innocent people on both sides are dying from the decisions of a government that we can't control all the actions of our government. Yeah, we vote, but we don't get to choose what they're doing overseas or domestically. We don't get
and what's so sickening about it is you go over to Israel, they don't support Netanyahu and his government. They don't want what the hell is going on. They absolutely believe that everything that's going on is counter to them ever getting family members and hostages back, which is why they're having unparalleled protests over there.
This is unpopular. This is deeply unpopular. People get tired of this constant fighting, and it's like people are losing lives. Like, it's starting to directly impact people. So, when you have these wars that are overseas somewhere, it might be somebody that's deployed over there, but these are people's family members. These are people's neighbors that are gone. Like, I think it's reality to the people that live in these countries. It's so easy for us to be like, to pontificate, but we got to stop the ridiculousness that's going on both sides, because it's like, it's a strike here, then okay, well, you hit our civilian target, so we're going to hit your civilian target. And it's like, what do the people have to do with this?
I do appreciate also that the female journalist, I can't remember none of their names right now, but she started right off by saying Netanyahu said a two-state solution is not in their plans at all. She came right out and said, yeah, he said that's not in their plans at all, and that's not in their plans to defend themselves, to having a two-state solution. Meaning, if you're talking two-state solution, BB ain't trying to hear none of that. Not in terms of no ceasefires, but we must continue.
As we move forward and get a two-state deal done. But right now, the thing we need to get done is this hostage deal and this ceasefire deal. We need a ceasefire. We need the hostage deal.
I want to switch gears to racial justice, Madam Vice President. Last month, you eulogized Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee.
Yeah.
Jackson Lee's signature bill, one of a few, was H.R. 40, which would create a commission to study the history of U.S. slavery and study the issue of reparations. She introduced H.R. 40 every session of Congress, taking up the mantle from Congressman John Conyers. This is a bill that you have co-sponsored as a U.S. Senator.
Chevy trucks with power you can count on. Capability that doesn't compromise.
Sorry.
Yet, this has, despite the fact that this has been, similar commissions have been created on the state level and on the local level, is yet to pass in Congress, let alone come out of committee. Congresswoman Jackson Lee, Congresswoman Barbara Lee, and other advocates have called for President Biden to take executive action to create this commission. Would you, as president, take executive action to create this commission, or do you believe that it should happen in Congress?
Well, first of all, as you mentioned, Sheila Jackson Lee, she was an extraordinary leader who we just recently lost, and she was a friend and a real champion for so many issues. So I feel compelled to say that about her. On the issue of what we need to do going forward, look, first of all, we just need to speak truth about history, in spite of the fact that some people are trying to erase history and try and teach our children otherwise. We need to speak truth about the generational impact of our history, in terms of the generational impact of slavery, the generational impact of redlining, of Jim Crow law. I could go on and on and on. These are facts that have had impact. And we need to speak truth about it. And we need to speak truth about it in a way that is about deriving solutions. And frankly, I think that we, and part of that is studying it to figure out exactly what we need to do. But part of what we can do right now is, for example, what I'm talking about in terms of building an opportunity economy, which is addressing explicitly the obstacles that historically and currently exist and dealing with them. Student loan debt, medical debt, bias in home appraisals. What we need to do in terms of dealing with an issue that I have championed for years, Black maternal mortality, which is the fact that Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die in connection with childbirth than other women. And we know that the reasons for that include disparities that pre-exist her pregnancy, including disparities that exist in the system during her pregnancy. So all of those things must be addressed.
Do you have a position on whether that should happen, this commission should happen through executive order or via Congress?
I think Congress ultimately will have the ability to do this work. I'm not discounting the importance of any executive action, but ultimately Congress. Because if you're going to talk about it in any substantial way, there will be hearings, there will be a level of public education and dialogue that, and I think that was part of the spirit behind the congressional action thus far, to ensure that everyone can participate in this conversation in a way that elevates knowledge about history and the reference points that that are the impetus of this conversation. Especially, again, when people are trying to deny history, when people are, so-called leaders are saying that enslaved people benefited from slavery. I mean, let's talk about the delta here in terms of the work that needs to be done. It's profound.
Madam Vice President, I want to move to Springfield, Ohio. and
Hold
what's happening.
on. All right. The reparations question. We in a whole black space. You got to answer this question about reparations. What's your take on her answer to that question about the reparations question?
If she would have just said that sentence that I typed in, I would like A+ answer, because she spoke to the generational impacts of it. None of the destinations that we're currently in, right, happened by circumstance. There were deliberate policy decisions where we were disproportionately impacted by that. We were not allowed to meaningfully engage in the economy for generations. There have always been legal, loopholes that we have to jump through that others don't. There's still to this day bias in lending, even with the same credit scores. So we can't get to equality without equity. As they got more resources in prior generations, it is now our time to get additional resources so that we can build that generational wealth up so that we can ultimately get to equality, but we can't get there without equity.
And they need to understand that equity does not mean that, oh, there's enough time between where we were in the past. Because what happens is they say, well, that was 100 years ago, so we ain't really dealing with that no more. We have to deal with the right now. But those systemic
Structures,
structures, thank you, are still in place. And then when there was the attempt to mitigate the systemic, not just systematic, because a lot of times you hear people, interchange systemic and systematic. We're talking systemic. That means the whole system is corrupted from its core. And that displays itself in systematic ways, but it is systemically corrupt. And when there were attempts to have things put in place to have some form of a small bit of mitigation for these structures that were, faulty, they said, oh, it's been enough time. We'll take that out of the way. And then expose that we went right back to this same systemic issue that never was fixed. There was the Band-Aid, and you said we put the Band-Aid on the wound. You said, oh, it's been enough time. We could take the Band-Aid off. It has to have healed. You take the Band-Aid off, and now we're back to bleeding again. Because it never healed.
Absolutely. And it's so interesting how people can argue against, equity all day, looking at it as zero sum. And I think really we need to be looking as equity as an additive, right? We're not taking away resources to give to somebody else. It's really focused on, we're giving everyone the opportunity to succeed by removing systemic barriers and leveling the playing field so that everyone has an equal chance of succeeding, because that's not the current reality. And I don't also like the whole meritocracy angle. Where do you think that people that most often argue for meritocracy come from a position of privilege where they had massive resources?
Mm-hmm.
Like when you can have a private tutor, when you can send your college application to a professional service where they help you get into these top schools so you can get these networking opportunities so that you can then become one of the elites that run things, right? Not everyone has those resources. So it's never been about who works the hardest, who's the smartest. It's never been that. It's who has the connections and who has the resources. And it hasn't been us historically. So I don't get what, people are arguing from, because a lot of them would benefit from equity, because depending on whether you're in an urban or rural setting, that impacts whether you have equal opportunity to succeed in this economy.
Let's be clear. when this government should have held fast, and all while they'll talk about how great Abraham Lincoln and that Congress was in bringing the country back together, what they did was, in their equivocation to the racists and bigots in the South, they did give more weight to states. And what happened was, what you had was, you had states, that you had the American government as a whole, the Fed saying, "Oh, we're going to give out land deals to anybody that can go out here and put a fence around some land, and we'll give you all of these hundreds of thousands of dollars so that you can, build up the American terrain and all of this stuff after the Louisiana Purchase and all of that." Shout out to the Haitians that helped us secure that. But but my point is, and then they left it, they say, but we'll leave it to the states. And these same racist states told black people, what? Y'all don't got no rights to all of this. And so now what happened was, we have the white people who got everything. These are the roots of when people talk about pulling themselves up by the bootstraps, and their history is never pulling themselves up by the bootstraps, but always being given boots already tied for them, polished, and it's so ridiculous. It's so absolutely ridiculous when we get in these conversations. And like you say, they always want equality, and with the full understanding that equality is not fair. Period. It never has been. It never will be.
If it's 50-50, someone has to lose.
Exactly.
Not everyone gets to win. But these are the same people that complain about, participation trophies. And really, the way that subsidies work in America disturbs me greatly, because it's like, you should be losing, but we're paying you to the point where you could stay in and win. But you're not doing that for everyone. That's not fair. That's equity right there.
Mind you, the idiots don't know that the whole existence of white people is they always had this, the equity for them and them alone. You understand what I'm saying? And nobody else. Let me be quiet. But to go back to where we were, when they asked her, do you think it can be done by the executive branch or by the Congress? I think it was a good answer for her to say Congress, because if you do it by the executive branch, even though the executive branch is a full branch and not just one person, I think that this country doesn't know enough civics to know that if it was done by the executive branch, that it didn't just come from just the one person, and therefore that executive would get blamed for it. And white people across this country would not be okay with a sitting black president telling them that they got to pay reparations. They're going to have no parts of that. None at all.
I like the answer as well, but for different reasons, right? Seeing what the composition of the Supreme Court is currently, it would be immediately challenged.
Yeah.
And knowing how this Supreme Court rules, it's not going to end up going the way that we want it to go. So it does need to come from Congress. But I just wanted to add this before we move on to the next topic. I was so glad that she mentioned currently what's going on with discriminatory lending, as well as the disparity in home appraisals. That matters a lot, because it's still occurring. They're acting like, oh, well, redlining was so long ago, but there's other things that are at play now, and that's when we get back into this systemic, structures and systems. This is where we get back into this, how it's still not level. So we can't have that equality that everyone says that they want when they don't. They want, there's this saying that I have: if there has to be inequality, at least let it be in my favor. And I feel like that's the default for a lot of white people. well, I mean, life's not fair, but if it's got to be unfair, I should get the most benefit from it. That's really what it boils down to, in my opinion. That's how I view it.
Interesting.
I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, everybody's going to be anthropomorphic in their whole view of everything. You know, that's just how people are going to view everything. What's in it for me? How is it going to impact me? What am I going to get out of it? And that the dangerous part of that is people don't understand that as a species, we don't live singularly or individually, and we are dependent on one another. We are a communicable species, and so there is need for one another. So when one segment says, "Oh, we just gonna do this and we don't need nobody else," then they call that's to the detriment, and it causes everyone, including themselves, whether or not they want to admit it, not to be successful. We need to look at the ants. We don't have these problems with the bees and the ants.
I think we're so interdependent that people don't recognize that's why specialization of labor is a thing, because it's mutually beneficial, because we're interdependent on each other, that we can do different things. We don't have to exhaust ourselves trying to cover all of the bases. There's some things in society that I don't want to do, but those functions are necessary for society to function. We're interdependent on each other. Like no one can do it by themselves. As much as people think about they want that pull yourselves up by the bootstrap, everyone says that until it's an economic crisis. Oh my gosh, I'm losing my house. The government needs to intervene. No. Bootstraps.
What happened to the bootstraps?
Get to pulling.
There, we've seen school closures, parents worried about their kids leaving the home because
let me go back a little bit,
racist conspiracy theories.
We missed the beginning of the question.
It's profound.
Madam Vice President, I want to move to Springfield, Ohio, and what's happening there. We've seen school closures, parents worried about their kids leaving the home because of racist conspiracy theories that I won't repeat here, but they have been repeated by leaders on the Republican side, President Trump, former President Trump, and Vice Presidential nominee J.D. Vance. From your perspective, is this just a case of irredeemable racism that can't be mitigated by any rational action, or is this a situation in which a federal response could help this community heal? There's a question of resources and
well, no, I'll let you finish and then I'll speak.
No comments.
It's a crying shame. I mean, my heart breaks for this community. You know, there were children, elementary school children, who it was school photo day. You remember what that's like? Going to school on picture day? Who were dressed up in their best, got all ready, knew what they were going to wear the night before, and had to be evacuated. Children. A whole community put in fear. And I'll say a couple things about it. One, you know, I learned a long time ago in my career, having a background as a prosecutor, when you have these positions, when you have that kind of microphone in front of you, you really ought to understand at a very deep level how much your words have meaning. I learned at a very young stage of my career that the meaning of my words could impact whether somebody was free or in prison.
Hey everyone, so the team decided to do a fun competition.
We love you.
If you're able to make a donation.
Not right now.
As Attorney General, I was of California, 5th largest economy in the world. I was acutely aware that my words could move markets. when you are bestowed with a microphone that is that big, there is a profound responsibility that comes with that. That is an extension of what should not be lost in this moment, this concept of the public trust. To then understand what the public trust means. It means that you have been invested with trust to be responsible in the way you use your words, much less how you conduct yourself. And especially when you have been and then seek to be again President of the United States of America. And so I go back to, it's a crying shame, literally. What's happening to those families, those children in that community, not to mention what is happening in terms of, look, you say you care about law enforcement resources being put into this because of these serious threats that are being issued against a community that is living a productive, good life before this happened. And spewing lies that are grounded in tropes that are age old. And look, I said it not very far from here the other day at the debate. This is not new. This is not new in terms of these tropes. This is not new in terms of where it's coming from. And, you know, whether it is refusing to rent to people, rent to Black families, whether it is taking out a full-page ad in the New York Times against 5 innocent Black and Latino teenagers, the Central Park 5, calling for their execution, whether it is referring to the first Black president of the United States with a lie, birther lies. And look, the American people deserve, and I do believe want better than this. I do believe that. I know. The vast majority of us as Americans know we have so much more in common than what separates us. I know that. I know that regardless of someone's background, their race, their gender, their geographic location, I know that people are deeply troubled by what is happening to that community in Springfield, Ohio. And it's got to stop. And we've got to say that you cannot be entrusted with standing behind the seal of the President of the United States of America, engaging in that hateful rhetoric that, as usual, is designed to divide us as a country, is designed to have people pointing fingers at each other. It's designed to do that. And I think most people in our country, regardless of their race, are starting to see through this nonsense and to say, you know what, let's turn the page on this. This is exhausting and it's harmful and it's hateful and grounded in some age-old stuff that we should not have the tolerance for. So let's turn the page and chart a new way forward and say, you can't have that microphone again.
Madam Vice President, I'm switching.
Hold on. You go, Kamz, because I have an unpopular opinion. I'll let you go.
I think that the positive response to the Springfield, let's just start there. I think the positive response to Springfield, where there's been members of the community speaking out, where they packed the Haitian restaurants that are in that surrounding area, speaks to the fact that diversity is a net benefit for society. Because if this was not a diverse community, if they didn't have those Haitians there, I truly do believe that a lot of them would be believing this BS. The woman has came out and said it was a lie, but people have ran off with it because, you know, the lie is more entertaining and it speaks to their deeper beliefs than the truth does. We've always had these sort of racial issues. None of this is new. I don't know what the federal government could even do about this. I mean, the cornerstone legislation was gutted because the Supreme Court said racism doesn't exist anymore.
My unpopular opinion is I don't want y'all to talk, and this is for Kamala and a lot of the Dems. Don't talk to me out of both sides of your necks, because in one breath, you telling me that you are lockstep and key. I mean, and just in lockstep with some of the most conservative, you said this out of your mouth. Senator Langford, some of the most conservative members, some of the most MAGA nuts out there, lockstep and key with passing legislations that make people feel this way about immigrants coming over, not just the Haitians, but all of the immigrants, because they're starting with the Venezuelans. You all sat there and said the problem is the immigrants, and we tried to pass this bill. Hell, it was Kamala and Biden's administration, Biden and Kamala's administration, where we have the infamous pictures of Haitian migrants on the border being whipped. That was this administration. And I know it sounds whacked out for these lies that they're putting out there, but I'm not going to the lie. I'm going straight to the truth, because the truth is, while they may be lying about those tropes, the truth is some people on the left feel just as horribly about those same Haitian immigrants and immigrants in general. They just aren't saying that they're eating cats and dogs, but they still don't want any parts of these individuals. They paint this picture as if everybody that's coming over here is just some horrible miscreant, just some awful person, and that they're subhuman species that we need to keep out of our borders. You all said that, Kamala. You all did that. You all painted that picture. And now that the MAGA nuts have picked up the mantle and ran with it, you can't be like, oh, they're horrible people for thinking this about the migrants, when you help inculcate these feelings about the migrants. So that's why whenever they keep and I know they're trying to win an election, but let's be clear, you still, at what cost? Because we negate the humanity of real people. These are real people. Just like they so flippantly negate the humanity of the Palestinians dying over there, they just as equally flippantly negate the humanity of immigrants that are coming over here. And I mean, it's just easier for the Republicans on that side because the Haitians are darker and they black. And it's much easier for them to hate on that. But it's no different than the picture that they're painting of the immigrants that's coming across the board. And I know that's not popular because people push me on that. Oh, you shouldn't say that about what Kamala them doing. We got to be quiet about that. But that's what's happening. This is real. That's what's happening.
You know, think about this. You know, like I love social media. I love memes. One of the most popular memes of Vice President Harris is her saying, "Do not come here. Do not come here," is what she was telling people seeking refuge, seeking to immigrate. Do not come here. So I don't think it's unpopular. It's just factual. And as much as people say that, oh yeah, we want immigration, we love immigration, it's all fine and dandy until people on both sides, they respond to this very negatively when they're coming to take your job. So they have this fear that they're going to be displaced economically by immigrants, but then you're aiming all this hatred at the immigrants when you really need to be looking at the business that are hiring them in the first place, because they don't want to pay people a livable wage. But we don't want to talk about that. We want to scapegoat the immigrants because it's easier than dealing with a lot of these systemic systems and structures in the U.S. like since the 80s, because Reaganomics was terrible for the middle class, and it continues to shrink. It continues to shrink. The free trade, agreements that we've done, they're no better. We've sold the middle class out. And then you want to blame some people that are trying to improve their lives? I think that's insane. Because apparently you come over here from some country and you just sit up on welfare and don't work, or at the same time you're working and you're taking everyone's jobs. Like, these two things can't be true at the same time. And I think there's this cognitive dissonance, which is why they can do this when they're talking about immigration, because we're better than the other side. But what does that really mean?
Right. I'm sorry. I had a mini spike on that.
Did you not say we speak truth to power over here?
We do speak truth to power. I had a little mini spike right then. I'm sorry. It was a small.
These are organic moments on the show.
So, all right, let's continue.
President Satan.
Gears again.
Okay.
Quick question. I want to talk to you about gun control. So you've said you support an assault weapons ban and universal background checks, and we actually learned during the debate that you are a gun owner. But in cities like Philadelphia, handguns are responsible for most homicides and violent crime. The most recent FBI data shows handguns were involved in 59% of murders in our country. How will you address the issue of the use of handguns? Because a push for an assault weapons ban only addresses a significant but small part of the problem.
So, first of all, yes, I am a gun owner, and Tim Walz is a gun owner, and we're not trying to take anybody's guns away from them. But we do need an assault weapons ban. Assault weapons are designed to kill a lot of human beings quickly, and have no place, I'm going to get to it.
Yes.
And have no place on the streets of a civil society. We need universal background checks, which, to your point about handguns, is about saying that it is just reasonable to want reasonable gun safety laws that say we should do background checks, that we ought to know. It's just reasonable. You might want to know before someone can buy a lethal weapon if they've been found by a court to be a danger to themselves or others. You might just want to know.
And respectfully, we do understand that.
But you're asking about...
I'm asking specifically about handguns, because many of those handguns aren't purchased in places.
Universal background checks apply to handguns.
Yes.
They do.
But in many instances, those handguns aren't even bought lawfully. Yes.
Which is why I also have been very adamant for years. In fact, I myself protested at a gun show probably 10, 15 years ago about the gun show loophole and why we need to close that. Because what ends up happening is that gun shows at flea markets, gun dealers are not, under existing law in the past, required to register their sales. And so you are exactly right that a lot of homicides, for example, a good number of them, I don't have the statistic in front of my mind, are committed with illegally purchased guns. And that's why we need to address each entry point in the issue, including universal background checks, closing the gun show loophole, and what we need to do as a general matter to focus not only on reaction to crime, but prevention of crime. So you're raising a very important issue that has many facets, including what we need to do in terms of reasonable gun safety laws and what we need to do around crime prevention, what we need to do around crime deterrence. But listen, I have personally prosecuted homicide cases. I have held the hands of mothers who have come to me crying, who have said, I only want to talk to Kamala, because they knew when they sat down, I would treat them with the dignity and respect that they were entitled and due. about the loss of their child, often their son, to gun violence and the need to take it seriously. And we must take it seriously in every way, understanding it's not just about a soundbite. It's about a comprehensive approach that deals with the tragedy of, to your point, everyday gun violence in America. It's real. It has had a profound impact in terms of trauma that for the most part has gone undiagnosed and untreated. The trauma that exists in communities around the violence of losing their children, losing a brother, losing a father, an uncle. All of that must be addressed, and we have to have a holistic response to it.
Are there things we haven't thought about yet? Because every time we bring up this issue of gun violence, universal background checks comes up and a ban on assault weapons. Are there other solutions that you're also thinking about that will get at this issue?
Absolutely. For example, part of what we did as vice president with the president, we were able to pass the first meaningful gun safety legislation in 30 years. And part of what that involved was millions and millions of dollars to put more mental health counselors in public schools, right? Because we know that there is an aspect of this that is about treating the trauma and dealing with it at its source before it ends up manifesting itself in a problem. There is the work that we need to do that is about putting resources into communities around violence prevention. I've been a big advocate of that for years, which includes what we need to do around putting resources into community-based intervention that is not just requiring on the good people in the community to volunteer to do the intervention, but actually paying people to do it because it's a full-time job. It's about understanding what we need to do to, again, understand that, to your point, we have to have a holistic response to this issue and prioritize it instead of reacting to the tragedy that sadly they are too predictable. Let's all agree, enough of that. There are very few solutions that we haven't thought of. We need to put the resources into them.
Madam Vice President, we want to move to the topic of reproductive.
Hold on. I hear what you're saying, crazy homebody girl, but I appreciate the journalist for keeping her, to the question. Because if I ask you a question and you start that question way off what I asked you, I do want to bring you back because you know how politicians are. If you let them go and never address the question, they will never address your question. So I just want to add that I do appreciate the young lady as well as the guy on the end. Thank you, Cam, for giving me their names. The dark skinned guy, his name is Jaron. But Eugene and Tanya, the girl's name is Tanya, they don't mind saying, hey, sweetheart, hey, boo. The question was, or they'll push and say, I know you said that, but you really ain't really answered the question. Can you really give me more? So I appreciate them for that. Go ahead, Kamz. I'm sorry.
I mean, I was just like, the constant interruption was what bothered me. But I also thought that it was a leading question. I don't like these questions where it's like, well, what would you do? Congress has to act on this. This is not something that the president does. And I feel like as journalists, they have a right to, they have an obligation, not a right. They have an obligation to really be that liaison between the average American citizen and the candidates. And we can't ban handguns. That's not going to happen. Then the point where she made with most of them are committed with like illegal weapons. Okay, so what you want us to do? Hell, drugs are illegal, but they still keep coming into the country. What do you want us to do about it? It's just like, why do people break the law? How are you going to prevent people from breaking the law? Like, she was looking for a specific like ban on handguns, and I don't feel that anything this complex could be answered that easily. She just rubbed me the wrong way.
You like crazy homebody girl. Yo, like
with the constant interruption, just because I feel that two things need to happen, right? Everyone deserves to have their name pronounced correctly. They deserve that basic respect, and they deserve to let their thoughts be fully heard. She kept interrupting. You should have let her finish the answer, then guide her back to where you want her to go. Because I mean, it was a leading question, to be quite frank.
I agree with you, Cymera. Even what you're saying, Cam, you can still intimate what your policy is on that, and then follow that up by saying, and these are all things that I'd love to have in place, but I have to have, because what I will continue to drive home is I have to have a Congress in place so that we can get laws on the books so that all of these great policies that I have can actually happen and we can have real substantive change that affect people's lives. But if we do not have a Congress that is able to get laws to my desk, then all of this is for naught. So I need everybody out there to go not only think about the top of the ticket, but I need you also to be thinking about how we need a Congress that is going to be right by my side to be there for the American people. That's what she should have been saying.
But you know, to that point too, I just because I feel like I'm cynical because I get this, it always boils down to that Second Amendment debate where we're talking about a well-regulated militia and the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. When you have a Supreme Court that is not in our favor, it don't matter what you're going to pass, because guess what? They're going to just kick it out. And it's a lot of this is the miseducation of the American.
But I mean, but if Congress passes a law, the Supreme Court, and it's signed, the Supreme Court can't wholeheartedly say, well, screw you, we're just going to say no. That's not, they
Well,
can't.
I know that's not how it works, El Teddy, but it's going to be tied up in court. You know that the districts are going to be, the appellate courts are going to be split. It's going to go to the Supreme Court and it's going to be struck down. We know that. If it can even get past the Senate, where again, everyone thinks that the Republicans are one unified party. Everyone thinks the Democrats are one unified party. They're not. And if you're in a more purple leaning area, are you really going to do something sweeping when you know that they're going to be like, they're trying to take your guns. They're trying to take your guns. We love guns more than we love children in America, as we've seen time and time again after every major shooting. Thoughts and prayers are all they have. That's it. Thoughts and prayers. It's not going to change. Like I want it to change, but like the cycle, nah. Okay. Even with the thing in Georgia, they had advance warning. I don't know who that administrator was, but man,
advance warning means that doesn't help at all. But then there's that.
I mean, if you had a credible threat 30 minutes before it happened,
you'd think that.
I mean,
I know, having worked in school system for many times, you could have all kinds of. They get a lot of credible things about a whole lot of stuff, and they don't do nothing.
Oh,
so,
yeah. They take them bomb threats seriously over here.
All right. We almost done.
Something that you have worked and leading on both for the administration, Democrats, and now the top of the ticket. You said that as president, you would want to codify Roe. If it came to your desk, you would sign a bill that did that. Roe protected access until fetal viability, which it also says is, quote, at about 7 months, but it may occur earlier, even at 24 weeks. So do you similarly support also codifying Roe's restrictions, which allowed states to ban abortion in the third trimester of pregnancy unless necessary to save the mother's life?
We need to put the protections of Roe v. Wade back into law. And when that bill gets passed by Congress, I will proudly sign it into law. Understand what is happening in our country. Over 20 states have passed what I call Trump abortion bans because I understand how we got here. The former president handpicked 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. They did as he intended, and in state after state, laws have been passed criminalizing healthcare providers. I don't know if anyone here has heard most recently the stories out of Georgia. Tragic story about a young woman who died because it appears the people who should have given her health care were afraid they'd be criminalized after the Dobbs decision came down. Laws that make no exception even for rape or incest, which means that you're telling a survivor of a crime, of a violation to their body, that they have no right to make a decision about what happens to their body next, which is immoral. An approach that doesn't take into account that most people, I think, agree you don't have to abandon your faith or deeply held beliefs to agree the government should not be telling her what to do with her body. If she chooses, she will talk with her pastor, her priest, her rabbi, her imam, but it should not be the government or Donald Trump telling her what to do about her own body and her life. So that's where I stand. We need to put back in place the protection of Roe v. Wade and put that into law.
And those restrictions that are also in.
We need to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade and let an individual, in consultation with her doctor, make the decision based on what she can determine, because she's smart enough to know what's in her best interest instead of having her government tell her what to do, especially a bunch of people in these state capitals who think they're in a better position to tell her what to do than she is to know what's in her best interest.
Before we conclude, Madam Vice President, Joyful Warrior has been...
Let me stop right there. Anything on that, Kamz?
No, I think she was succinct. She was to the point. She explained how the process is going to have to work for us to get it back. And I thought the follow-up question they asked was stupid because the federal law would supersede these state laws.
And I think that I understood the premise of Eugene's question when he talked about the restrictions of the third trimester bans that some states had, even with Roe. That was speaking to the fact that whack job Donald Trump is out here saying that we have people that are killing babies on the on the birthing table. You know what I'm saying? As soon as they come out the mom, they're deciding that there's time for an abortion, which is not an abortion at that point, it's murder. But whatever. But I think that's what that was. I think the spirit of the question was to go down that road because we have real people believing that. We really have people believing that nonsense. But I thought she was very clear on her answer to that question.
Clear, concise, succinct. I do wish she would answer more questions that way.
Listen, you took it right out of my, you took it right out of my, I was just about to say, if she could answer all her questions just as clear, that'd be great. That would be great.
It seems like a lot of
it has been used to describe.
You didn't see that just a minute ago, though. Okay, I'm back to my joyful part.
And your opponent and Republicans have
is to know what's in her best interest.
Before we conclude, Madam Vice President, Joyful Warrior has been used to describe.
You didn't see that just a minute ago, though. Okay, I'm back to my joyful part.
And your opponent and Republicans have at times weaponized you laughing in campaign ads, for example. Why is joy important to you to insert into this election? And what do you make of Republicans using that as a way to suggest that you're not a serious candidate?
Well, sometimes I think, and I'll say to whoever the young people are who are watching this, there are some times when your adversaries will try and turn your strength into a weakness. Don't you let them. Don't you let them. I find joy in the American people. I find joy and optimism in what I see to be our future and our ability to invest in it. I find joy in the ambition of the people. I find joy in the dreams of the people. I find joy in building community. I find joy in building coalitions. I find joy in believing that the true measure of the strength of a leader is not based on who you beat down, but who you lift up. And I think we should all find joy and have a sense of optimism about who we are as Americans and what we mean to each other and what we can do to lift each other up.
Madam Vice President, did you President Biden spoke to former President Trump after the attempt on his life this weekend. Have you spoken to him?
I have.
And earlier today, I assume.
Yes.
How'd that go? You want to give us some intel?
Sure. I checked on him to see if he was okay.
Yeah.
And I told him what I have said publicly. There's no place for political violence in our country. I am in this election and in this race for many reasons, including to fight for our democracy. And in a democracy, there is no place for political violence. We can and should have healthy debates and discussion and disagreements, but not resort to violence to resolve those issues.
On January 6th, your vehicle was allowed to kind of pass a viable pipe bomb. We've seen.
No, I was in the building.
You were in the building. And we've seen what's happening with former President Trump. Do you have full confidence in the Secret Service to protect all of you?
I do.
You feel safe for you and your family?
I do. But I mean, you can go back to Ohio. Not everybody has Secret Service. And there are far too many people in our country right now who are not feeling safe. I mean, I look at Project 2025 and I look at, like the Don't Say Gay laws coming out of Florida. Members of the LGBTQ community don't feel safe right now. Immigrants or people with an immigrant background don't feel safe right now. Women don't feel safe right now. And so, yes, I feel safe. I have Secret Service protection, but that doesn't change my perspective on the importance of fighting for the safety of everybody in our country, and doing everything we can to, again, lift people up and not beat people down so they feel alone and are made to feel small and made to feel like they're somehow not a part of it or us.
Madam Vice President, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. I've appreciated it. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. All right. And that was the full interview. Thoughts?
I like how she ended it saying, like, I feel safe. I have Secret Service, but not everyone has Secret Service. And I think that resonates with, she realizes what she has versus what other people have. But, maybe as she goes on the campaign trail some more, I recognize that, the opportunities I was given, not everyone was given. So under my, economy, I want to make sure that everyone gets the opportunity to succeed. She needs to go with something like that, because it made her very relatable when she was like, look, I got the Secret Service, but the people in Ohio, they don't feel safe. I felt that made her very, very human in that moment, because she was acknowledging, yes, I have a little privilege. Yes, I'm VP, but I'm trying to be president for everyone, and not everyone has what I have.
I'll say this. First of all, this was the best interview that we've had of either candidates this entire election cycle, even going back to when Biden was in the race. This was the best interview. Why? Because they cut through all of the fluff. They got to issues, real substantive issues. They hit, things that were happening right now. They hit issues, over art. It was great. No interview is going to be perfect. Even in Kamala and how she approached it, I may not, and you all may not agree with all of her stances, but the fact that we had a candidate that sat there, took every question, and attacked every question. And I'm not going to even say, Simera, that the bar is low. What I will say is this was more akin to a traditional standard interview of someone running for president. What my fear is this. They gave all of that real estate to the NABJ interview that Donald Trump had because he was being blatantly racist. I fear you ain't gonna see none of this. None of it.
And it doesn't help that the diddler is controlling the airwaves right now. Or yes, I mean that is important, especially to to the victims. But I would argue this is also important.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like sometimes we don't give things the weight that they deserve because we don't want to be informed. We wish to be entertained.
Right. And for those people who came in late, I know some people came in late. We chose to interrupt our regularly scheduled programming because, like I said, a lot of people did not see that this happened today. This was the sit down interview that the National Association of Black Journalists did with Kamala in Philadelphia today. And it's nowhere. It's getting zero traction. You don't hear anybody talking about it. And we here over here on Red, Blue, and Black don't want to be negligent. Just like I gave real estate to Donald John when he sat down with the NABJ. We wanted to be just as equitable here when Kamala did it. And like I said, this was a much better interview on both sides. On both sides, a much better interview. I don't even think that the national news networks, the big news, are going to cover it, and which is unfortunate. Uh, Now, the cynic in me is going to say, yeah, they don't want to cover the black journalist because this is black journalist talking to this black woman, and there's not any, oh my God, gotcha, there's no, if it bleed, it leads moments, in this. This was me talking to my policies, but then in the next breath, they're going to have people that say, but when is she going to discuss policy? Well, when is she going to discuss policy? Well, when is she going to discuss policy? And here we have all policy. That's what we had here. We literally sat here and said, I don't like this. I do like this. I'm okay with that. I'm not so okay with that. And that is what this is supposed to be about. We shouldn't have these moments where we're being, that live in superlatives. You know what I'm saying? Everything's so hyperbolic. It should be boring and measured and nerdy and all of that things, all of those, because that's what we're looking for when we're looking for a president. We're not looking for a reality show person. And
I think that bring the boring presidential debates back, right? I miss the times where voting was similar to an errand you had to run, like, oh, I need to go get some milk and eggs from the store. I needed to be more like that versus every election since 2016. I felt like there is an existential crisis. I shouldn't feel that way about politics because, again, I do believe in diversity of thought. Not everyone has to agree with me, but we could disagree and be friends as long as the disagreement is not rooted in the oppression of others or stripping them of their human rights and their dignity.
Exactly.
Otherwise, I can't fuck with you.
So I applaud this. I often say share video. This is certainly a video you want to share so that people can come, and when you have your friends or loved ones that say, well, she'll never talk about her policies or what does she want to do, you can point them to this video and say, nope, here's an interview that she did where she talked all policy, took the tough questions, because she did get some tough questions. They asked her about black men. They asked her about Palestine and Gaza. They asked her about the economy. They asked her about reproductive rights. They asked her about gun control. They asked her about the immigrant crisis. They got down to the real meat and potatoes. They asked her about the economy. They really hit her on all of the all of the big policy issues that a lot of people want to hear.
Yeah, these are things that people are really worried about with this presidential election coming up. How are things going to change? Because these things impact us in various ways, right? So I think that she was answering questions of substance, but it is a topic that to me is drier than a Popeye's biscuit, right? But it's necessary. We need to know where the candidates stand on these issues, because ultimately, from this show, you ain't got to vote the same way we vote, but we want you to make an informed vote based on what is actually going to be happening, what is actually on these platforms, and what's really at stake in this election. I think that the information needs to be disseminated, because to your fear, I don't know if this interview is really going to be broadcast that well, because they don't care about like covering, relevant things. They just care about the engagement, the numbers, the clicks, and the views.
Mm-hmm.
It's unfortunate.
I mean, gone are the days where all we needed to do was care about entertainment or things like that, because we knew the president and the government, they were over there doing boring stuff that we didn't care about and not burning the whole government down.
I mean, I like, now it's like we already talking about another government shutdown because they can't get the votes together to fund the government. But these are the people that are elected to do the business of the American government, and they can't do their job.
And then there's that.
It's like, why do we have the intern in Congress? Why is the intern in Congress? You don't know like the customs, you don't know the rules, you don't know what's in the Bill of Rights. What's going on? It feels like we're in some sick reality. It's a sick reality TV show at this point. How bad can they get, and what is the American response to it? Do we go along with the foolishness, or do we just look around wondering what the fuck is going on? Because I feel like people haven't done that yet. I feel like people have not had the what the fuck moment yet. Now, some people are like, oh, they're eating dogs. Oh my gosh, that's so crazy. Like, this is not normal. It hasn't been normal well before this.
Yeah, it has not been normal for some time now.
I want to return to normal. Give me a boring person whose policy positions I disagree with, a little sprinkling of religious fundamentalism. You've got a pretty decent Republican candidate in comparison to this absolute dumpster fire train wreck that is rogue, cannot be controlled. Apparently wasn't reading the briefings because, they was too long. So, less than 4 paragraphs, we're not going to read it. So to me, I don't understand what's going on with those who disagree with me policy-wise, position-wise, politics-wise, for why you feel this person is the best representation of your belief system. Because in one of the stories I sent you, it's turning a lot of like lifelong Republicans off. They were like, look, I did it in 2016. I can't hold my nose twice. I can't do it twice. So I think we'll be surprised that, the polls might say one thing, but people probably gonna go in there, they're gonna have their what the fuck moment. I think people are gonna have it, because I've heard some very weird things from our elected representatives. It's disturbing to me, like, that some people are elected and say these things. It's worrying to me that political violence is normalized now. Because remember what happened with all that rhetoric when they shot up that congressional softball game.
And Scalise came right back out and said, oh yeah, we need more guns. Wait a minute, sir, you were just shot. And your response from the hospital bed was more guns? This is the lunacy of it all. That's
not more guns, mo guns. Mo guns.
Dear God.
There's more guns than people in this country.
I will say this. The more she does interviews, the better she gets at it. The more refined she gets at really not just speaking to her policies, but relating them in a way that is easily digestible. So she is like, this was light years better than the CNN interview. Now, mind you, the journalists were better than Dana Bash and had better questions than Dana Bash, but that's a whole different story for a whole nother day. I thought I didn't like the fact that she did a tandem interview with the vice president, because we're not running on Tim Walz's policies. You're running on yours, and I thought it was. I never agreed with her doing it in tandem with Tim Walz, but that's a whole different story.
I think that as she continues to do these interviews, like she's learning how to craft and craft her message, get those sound bites in, but she's also adapting her communication style for the different audiences that she's speaking to, right? Because ultimately, what's going to determine who becomes president? Who can best craft that message that resonates with people, right? Where you're using some emotional intelligence, you got your clarity, you got some empathy in there. But you're also using the right verbiage when others may not have the same level of expertise in what you're talking about, or they just don't have the same education. They don't know what you're talking about. So you're breaking it down or you're talking it up depending on who your audience is so that you can connect with them on that level. Because I told you, one of the biggest indicators of who you're going to vote for, who do you want to have a beer with? I think that's a terrible metric, but people want the president to be relatable. I want the president to be competent, but
exactly.
But we all want different things, right?
Don't we all? What you got going on, sir? What do you want to say to the people before we get out of here?
I would say protect your mental health. There's a lot of negativity in the news right now, but that leads engagement. Don't get too far down rabbit holes with a lot of the things that are going on. Very dark things happen in the world every day, but there's positive things that happen as well. Don't let this election cause a sense of doom and gloom. Always have a sense of hope.
Okay. Ronald, we may have to answer that question next time. That's a loaded question. That's a loaded question. So
a traditional one, like you mean like way back when we were supposed to have one? Is that the primary, like, or the primary after Biden?
I'm assuming. Yeah, I'm assuming. I love the I feel there absolutely needs to be a primary process.
I love a primary.
We have to have a primary process. Absolutely need a primary process. And I say that because you end up talking more policy during the primaries than you have once the nominee is there. Because in the primaries, we got to separate the men from the boys. Okay. And we need to know who really agrees with what I got going on. So
I love the primary system because I truly believe it empowers us to hold elected representatives accountable. If they are the incumbent and they have not been meeting our needs, that primary is that feedback loop that we have where we can make a different decision. So I think that it's important because it only enfranchises us. And it, to me, makes our votes more important versus being told this is who we're voting for.
Yeah, so I hope that answers your question. Ronald.
Because I don't think that it would have made us more fractured, Ronald, because I feel that Joe Biden, if he was in that primary, Israel and Palestine would have continued to be an issue for him. So he would have had to have moved a little bit more left because the progressives would not be a reliable voting bloc for him. So when you get past that primary, whoever it is, you have to look at your platform and you're like, okay, well, I got to give something to these people that I couldn't get during the primary. You have to give them something if you're trying to motivate them to go out and vote. We would have gotten some of what we wanted versus none of what we wanted if Biden would have been in and you wanted to see a more humane solution in the Middle East.
And the thing, and to that point too, as we've seen during this last few weeks or last month or so, there are a lot of great people that they just been thrusted in there and given the opportunity. They too could have unified the party. They too could have garnered a lot of support. and been great candidates. There is a deep bench with regard to viable Democrats that can run for the president. So yeah, some you haven't even heard of. So then
Yeah,
there's that.
and I think a lot of times we complain about like the establishment, right? And not having the primary ensures that the establishment is the establishment. And I can agree with that point too. Rana, we were coalescing around her. She's our person.
I think there was a moment of exigence for just the American public in general. We were literally watching a train wreck with both Donald John and Joseph Robinette. And I think the American public said, wait a minute. This is, it was a scary situation, and it created this moment of exigence where they said, when there was another option, they said, oh yes, and everybody did this. Whew. You know what I was like? Please, we need something, something, anything, anybody. Because guess what? What if they had a viable candidate on the other side?
And you notice how when Joseph Robinette, because you haven't been using the correct name tonight, Joseph Robinette dropped out, the big criticism was his age. They haven't mentioned Trump's age. They haven't mentioned Trump's lucidity. They haven't brought that up at all. Because now it's a liability. When it was a liability for Biden, everybody in mainstream media was saying it. But now, nothing is being said. Because to me, with Joseph Robinette, still in the race, it felt like the battle of the geriatrics. It really did. And it's like, to me, it was a stinging castigation of like the establishment, because what is the commentary that we could have on how many of our government, elected representatives are of an advanced age, is how I would phrase it. Like, what about the generational representation? Because the people that are really suffering the most are everyone's post-boomer. What about our needs? Because we have different needs than the elderly. There's just different needs.
I mean, what does it say that 75% of the country are post-baby boomers, and the only two viable candidates that you have are baby boomers? What does that say about us?
Now, the same baby boomers now that inherited the best economy like ever. And then you know what? They pulled that ladder up behind them and they said, none for you. That's what they did. So to me, I just feel like we need more diversity of thought. We need some fresh ideas from younger generations, because our problems are different than their problems. And we need to be adequately represented at the table. Because again, if you don't have a seat at the table, you're on the menu.
I do like, and especially with this interview, that the feel and the approach at the questions, the wording of the question did have a feel as if it was geared toward the younger generations, the millennials, the Gen Z voters. Even the interviewers, you saw that there was youth there. They spoke to things that the younger vote would care about, which is I thought it was great. And that's a base that cannot be ignored by either party, and I think it is to the detriment of said parties, because that's the fastest growing base, Gen Z. It's the fastest growing and largest part of the electorate.
But then it's really interesting that you say that, because this is a large part of the electorate, right? We know how Gen Z feels about social media apps, and they're still trying to like push this TikTok ban.
which I said at the time, if you remember, I said, what the fuck are you doing, Joe Biden? You're alienating a whole A whole segment of your base. A mess.
Ooh, Jason, that's a very valid point. Oof.
You spoke a word there, Robin. I mean, not Robin, Ronald. I interchanged his first name and last name and said Robbins. Ronald. Anyway, y'all, it's 11:36 and y'all got to get up for work in the morning. So do I, unfortunately. And I just got a text from one of my I didn't say anybody was coming over. All I said was I got a text.
You up?
Anyway, we about to get out of here, y'all. We thank y'all so much for being here. We are so glad to bring this to you all because, like I said, people were not you didn't see. I'm sure none of you all saw this on your timelines today. And I'm so glad we were able to present this to you. But we're about to get out of here. But like we always say around here, regardless if the country is red or the country is blue, we will always be black. And we will always be here for you. Until next time, thank y'all for coming. Y'all drive safely. I'm not getting no baby oil. Baby oil. Baby oil. I ain't get no baby oil ready. Bye, y'all. Baby oil.